More than 40 item changes are coming in 4.4, and with this video I'm gonna make sure that you know everything before the patch even drops, so let's get right at it. First we have Surging Scales. This is a component which grants armor and slow resist when you're in combat with champions. This item is a replacement for Chain Vest in the Mantle of the 12-Hour recipe. The same also happens to the Amaranth Twin God. Here the Chain Vest also vanishes and we get the Surging Scales. But for some reason the slow resist just magically vanishes on the completed item. We also have a change for Deadman's Plates components. Here we also have Surging Scales. For Thornmail there's another change. Stats wise it stays the same item, but the anti-healing effect gets a change. Previously you were able to apply your anti-healing effect if you immobilized an enemy champion and then applied 60% grievous wounds. With the new item, you can only apply 50% and you can't immobilize an enemy anymore to apply that effect onto them. It's only at all times ever 50% and they have to hit you. We also get a new item which is a component for Sheen. It is called Ring of Revelation. It grants you 10 ability haste, costs 400 gold and builds into Sheen. Sheen is also 100 gold cheaper than before. We are also getting a new component for mage items, which is called Hextech Alternator. It grants you health and AP and has a bonus effect. Damaging abilities and empowered attacks against champions deal 25 to 60 bonus magic damage on a 20-second cooldown. AP anti-healing also gets a change. The Oblivion Orb is 100 gold more expensive, but on the other hand, it gains 5 more AP. Haunting Guys will lose 50 HP, but on the other hand, it will also cost 200 gold less. Needlessly Large Rod is also getting a few changes. Number 1, it gains more AP, number 2, its price is increased by 100 gold, and number 3, it builds out of 2 Amplifying Tombs now. Lost Chapter gains 50 extra mana but loses 10 ability haste. Luckily for you, it also gets 150 gold cheaper. We also get a fundamental change to how Runans works as an item. Runan's Hurricane was known as a crit item. Now it's different. It loses its crit chance but it gains adaptive stats, in this case 30 AD or 60 AP. On top of this, it gets the Windblade passive. Attacks deal 15 bonus physical damage on hit against targets. The AP time has come, my friends, and we are getting the real Soul Stealer, Magi's Soul Stealer. This item will cost you 1500 gold, but it will grant you the key to every door on this planet. The item grants you 100 health, 30 AP, and 7% Magic Pen. On top of this, you can gain up to 30 stacks of glory. Stacking this item fully will grant you up to 180 AP and 10% bonus movement speed. Now if you think of Rabadon, this combination will be very powerful in the later stages, especially if you don't die so much. This item will be very powerful on mages and every enchanter that, well, doesn't die too much, because if you die, you lose 10 stacks. Mages are also now receiving a version of Serpent's Fang. 200 max health, 80 AP, 7% magic pen, and 10 ability haste. The shield reduction differentiates between AoE abilities or single target abilities. The cap for the AoE abilities is up to 45%, and you start with 25 with a scaling of 5% bonus AP. For single target abilities, it will be 40% of the get-go and up to 60%. So if the enemy picks a lot of shielding and you have no AD champion on the team that could have itemized Serpent's Fang, well, you now have a perfect reply. As you've seen so far, every item has gotten some percentage magic pen. The same happens to Horizon Focus, but there are no other changes to this item. The same also happens to Riftmaker, but there's also a slight change in its recipe. It loses the Haunting Guys and gets the Hextech Alternator. This will help you itemize more defensively from the get-go with an early component compared to the finished Haunting Guys. Cosmic Drive is also receiving the same buff to its magic pen, and the recipe remains unchanged. Next to all these lovely items, we get a new item called Crown of the Shattered Queen. It grants you HP, ability power, magic pen, maximum mana, and ability haste. This item also grants you Safeguard. It's basically a spell shield that reduces incoming damage for 70% for 1.5 seconds, and while the shield persists, you also get another 20 AP. And if the shield is on cooldown, you can basically use abilities to reduce its cooldown by 5% per instance. But it doesn't matter if you hit multiple people, you only get the reduction once. As an example, it doesn't matter if your Oriana Ball hits 3 people, you only get the reduction for 1 person, which in this case will be 5 seconds. In addition to this, you need to be out of combat for the shield to recharge. Crystalline Reflector gets entirely changed. It loses 10 armor, gains 150 health, loses all of its abilities, and gets a new passive. In the past, you gained up to 3 shots that each block 10 physical damage with an AP scaling, and in return would deal 20 magic damage plus 10 AP to the enemy champion once you're getting hit. The new passive has a level scaling. It reduces up to 8 to 15 physical damage that's incoming, and deals 10 plus 3% AP plus 1% bonus health to the enemy champions. And these shards only hold for 3 seconds, but it doesn't seem like there's a shard cap. It also gets 100 gold more expensive, and I don't believe anyone will build this item anymore. Okay, many of you probably ask themselves, if we get percentage pen, what happens to our flat pen? Well, we lose void stuff, that's a given, but our flat pen items such as Infinity Orb also get percentage pen. The same happens also to Awakened Soul Stealer. This one will also get a changed recipe by just getting a Ring of Revelation mixed into the build path. Harmonic Echo gets a complete change. In this version in 4.4 it gets a new build path with the Ring of Revelation, but on 4.3D it will get changed completely. The gold cost will be reduced by 200 and the effect will be nearly doubled, therefore turning this item from a dead item into a very good item. Sona and Soraka will love this item now. Nash's Tooth is getting a recipe change. Instead of a stinger, it now builds out of a recurve bow. The price remains unchanged, but also the recurve bow recipe is getting changed, as you see. Recurve bow will be 500 gold more expensive with the same stats but with a new passive called Reinforced. Attacks will deal 15 bonus physical damage on hit against targets. Archangel Staff is also getting slightly changed. It gets 7% magic pen like every other item and the Ring of Revelations added to its build path. The same also happens to Lichbane, percentage pen and an added Ring of Revelations to its build path. With great sadness, I have to inform you that the only change for Rod of Ages is the added magic pen. We don't get the PC version and I'm very sad. I really want to see this version in this game. Liandry's Torment is getting buffed. It gains the magic pen like every other item, it gains 50 health and an added ruby crystal to its build path without any increase in its total cost. Many champions were building Rabadon's Death Cap as their second item because of its powerful amplification through overkill. Riot doesn't like this idea, removes 10 flat AP from the item, slaps a scaling, level-based AP scaling on top, and gives the item Magic Pen. What does this mean to you? Well, you won't be building this one as your second item anymore, that's for sure. To be in line with the other anti-healing change on Thornmail, Morellonomicon is also getting changed. Number 1, it gets percentage pen, and number 2, the maximum healer reduction is capped at 50, but also instantaneously starts at 50. Well, and to give you a treat, Luden's Echo is getting buffed again. Same as the other items, it gains percentage magic pen, which this item never needed. Like, this item got buffed so many times, it is the most broken first item for any mage out there. Oh yeah, and it also gets a Ring of Revelation added to its recipe. Jarm's Fist is getting 100 gold cheaper and loses 25 health. Hax Drinker is getting a complete makeover. It gains 5 AD, loses 10 magic resistance, is 100 gold cheaper, and loses its lifeline passive. Phage is also getting 100 gold cheaper and loses 25 health. Last Whisper is getting 200 gold more expensive, but gains 5% extra armor pen. And as you guys can see, there is no more Lord Dominic's Regards in the shop. BF Sword stays the same in terms of stats, but gets a recipe change. Rather than building out of one longsword, it now builds out of 2 longswords. Which means you don't have to wait for another 1000 gold to basically buy this item and can just stack your inventory with longswords. Noon Quiver is getting 150 gold more expensive and gains 5% extra attack speed. The reason for this is the added dagger into its recipe. Zeal is also getting a change. It gets 5% crit chance and is getting 100 gold more expensive, and Static Shift and Rapid Fire Cannon are removed from the game. However, as you see, there's one new item which I'll talk about in a few moments. But before, let's talk about the new anti-healing item for bruisers, which is called Kempunk Chainsword. It grants you 200 health, 40 attack damage, 10 ability Ace, and is dirt cheap and applies anti-healing. But as you see, it doesn't really have armor pen anymore. So does a bruiser really want this version? You remember the AP Serpent's Fang, right? But what about the normal Serpent's Fang? It is also getting a change. Melee champions reduce the shielding on enemy champions flat by 40% and 10% bonus AD up to 60. Ranged champions are starting at 25% with another 10% bonus AD scaling up to 45%. 25% shielding reduction. Hullbreaker is getting more expensive and loses 25 health. The stats of Edge of Night remain the same, but it gets an added longsword built into its recipe. Phantom Dancer stats remain the same, but its recipe is entirely changed. Previously it built off a Zeal and a Noon Quiver. Now it's a Noon Quiver, a Brawler's Glove and a Dagger. I have teased the new item before, and we are talking about the Magnetic Blaster. It's literally a combination of Rapid Fire and Static Shift into one item without losing any of their respective benefits. So what does this mean for AD carries? Now AD carries have an item which grants them range and wave clear and basically AoE damage in teamfights. This will be a great item, but only if you can manage to get all the other needs of an AD carry settled beforehand. Which means lifesteal, crit damage, then armor pen if you really need it, and only then you can really go for a range enhancer. Therefore, I believe that this item will be very good once you get your boots, your first item and your second item. With the change to Hex Drinker, you can also expect a change to more, and here we have a juicy one. First, the item gets 200 gold more expensive, which is not that much of a problem. It gains 10 AD, it stays the same on the magic resist department, ability haste department as well, but it gets a change to its lifeline passive. Lifeline is now gone, but we get Demon Bane. 20% of your normal auto attacks are converted into a magic shield. This will stack up from 60 to 400 depending on your level, and decays by 5% per second. So this in combination with the new Bloodthirster I'll present you a little bit later, and maybe Murktratz will make you invincible when it comes to mages. Oh yeah, and it builds out of 2 Hex Drinkers. Trinity Force just gets a Ring of Revelation added to its recipe. To make Black Cleaver even nicer, you get 1 added longsword to the item build path. So previously you had a really feels Batman moment when you had to complete Ruby into Kindle Gem. Now for the same gold you can have Phage, longsword and another Ruby Crystal, which is very powerful. Mortal Reminder gets a complete identity change. It is now a crit item. It gets 300 gold more expensive, loses 15 AD but gains 25% crit. Also, the anti-healing fundamental change is happening to also this item, which means 50% is the top percentage you can reduce in terms of healing. On one hand, it's pretty nice that you don't have to choose between armor pen items now, because most of the times if your team didn't buy any anti-healing, you were forced to buy it, and then you had like basically one useless slot which you had to use for this item. But now it turns into a core item for every AD carry that needs armor pen. Its recipe is basically the same, but just has an added Brawler's Glove. Infinity Edge just has a change to its BS sword, as I mentioned earlier, and that's kind of it. The same applies to Steric's Gauge, but the item stats are still the same. Duskblade of Draktar is getting a change in 4.3D even before 4.4. Basically it gains more armor pen and deals more damage. Now for the patch's highlight, Bloodthirster. The cost remains the same, but the item is getting Omega buffed in the early game. As of right now, Bloodthirster is still the best first item, even before the change. It is simply better than Shieldbow is, and now it's gotten even more powerful. However, it is weaker in the late game because you lose the shielding. And in the late game, surviving is more important than dealing a tiny bit amount of extra damage, because living for 1 second longer will allow you to deal way more damage than 25 AD could ever amount to. Nonetheless, now this item is the first item for every AD carry out there. Every single one will build this item. And if for whatever reason your champion cannot build this item, well, unlucky, maybe just go next. You will run Gluttonous Greaves, this item, and maybe even Bloodline or Alacrity, it doesn't really matter. You have 12% from this item, 7% from the Greaves, and up to 8% from Bloodline. And now imagine you gain the attack speed from Shieldbow added on top, plus 11 to 25 AD. How unbalanced is this item as a starter? Like, come on, right? You really can't do this. Berserker Greaves are also getting a slight buff. They gain 3 added attack damage. And for our last change, we have Armor Pen Boots. These are getting 2 extra armor pen and get cheaper by 100 gold. Does this mean that you'll build these boots now over Gluttonous Greaves? Hell no. These boots are still shit. However, it's important for me to say that there are a few champions that can run these boots, but only champions that can really utilize Sudden Impact and potentially Duskblade, because you really need any point of flat armor pen to make it count. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment to boost the algorithm, join the membership, join the Patreon, we'll work on a website by the way, and most importantly, catch me live streaming, ask me any question, I'll be more than glad to answer them, and see me mold in Sovereign Elo, or whatever I'm doing at the moment. Anyway, peace out.